Have you ever looked at someone speaking English fluently and thought, I wish I could speak like that? Maybe you've spent months learning grammar. Maybe you've watched hundreds of English videos. Maybe you've memorized thousands of vocabulary words. But when it's finally time to speak, your mind goes blank. Your heart starts beating faster. And suddenly, all those words you've learned disappear. If that sounds familiar, then this video might change the way you learn English forever. Because today, I'm going to tell you a true story. A story about someone who couldn't speak English confidently. Someone who was afraid of making mistakes. Someone who believed that becoming fluent was almost impossible. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. That person discovered ChatGPT. Now, before you think this is another video about technology, wait. This is not really a story about AI. It's a story about confidence. It's a story about practice. It's a story about never giving up. And most importantly, it's a story about proving that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary results. A few years ago, English was one of my biggest struggles. I could understand a little. I could read simple sentences. I knew some grammar rules. But speaking English? That was a completely different challenge. Whenever someone spoke English in front of me, I became nervous. Whenever I tried to speak, I worried about my pronunciation. I worried about my grammar. I worried about making mistakes. And because of those fears, I stayed silent. Have you ever experienced that feeling? You know what you want to say. The sentence is somewhere inside your mind, but the words refuse to come out. You stand there thinking, translating, overthinking, and by the time you're ready to answer, the conversation has already moved on. That was my reality. Every single day. I remember watching people speak English confidently on YouTube. I admired them. I wanted to be like them. But at the same time, I felt frustrated. Because no matter how much I studied, my speaking didn't improve. I bought books. I watched courses. I learned grammar rules. I memorized vocabulary. Yet something was missing. The problem wasn't knowledge. The problem was practice. And that's a mistake many English learners make. They spend years studying English, but very little time actually using English. Imagine learning how to drive a car by reading books only. Would you become a good driver? Of course not. Eventually, you must sit behind the wheel and practice. Language works exactly the same way. You become fluent by using it, not by studying it endlessly. Unfortunately, finding someone to practice with isn't always easy. Maybe your friends don't speak English. Maybe you feel shy. Maybe you don't have access to teachers. Maybe you simply don't know where to start. That was exactly my situation. And honestly, there were moments when I wanted to quit. I thought maybe English wasn't for me. Maybe I was too old. Maybe I wasn't talented enough. Maybe fluency was only for gifted people. But then, something happened that completely changed my perspective. One day, I opened ChatGPT for the very first time. One evening, after another frustrating day of trying to improve my English, I was scrolling through the internet. I wasn't looking for anything special. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I was simply searching for a better way to learn. Then I came across something called ChatGPT. People were talking about it everywhere. Some said it could answer questions. Some said it could help with writing. Others said it could be a personal teacher. Honestly, I was curious, but I wasn't convinced. I had already tried many learning methods before. Most of them worked for a few days and then lost their effectiveness. So I thought, why should this be any different? Still, I decided to give it a chance. I opened ChatGPT and typed a very simple message. Can you help me learn English? Within seconds, I received a friendly reply. The answer was clear, simple, easy to understand, and surprisingly encouraging. For the first time, it felt like someone was actually ready to help me without judging me. I asked another question, then another, then another. Before I realized it, nearly an hour had passed. I was completely engaged. That night, something interesting happened. Instead of studying English like a school subject, I was actually communicating in English. And that felt different. Very different. The next day, I came back. Then the next day. And then the day after that. Soon, chatting with ChatGPT became part of my daily routine. At first, my English was far from perfect. Actually, it was full of mistakes. Sometimes my grammar was wrong. Sometimes I used the wrong words. Sometimes my sentences didn't make sense at all. But something amazing happened. Every time I made a mistake, ChatGPT corrected me. Not in a harsh way. Not in an embarrassing way, but in a supportive way. Instead of feeling discouraged, I felt motivated. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of making mistakes, because mistakes became lessons. And every lesson brought improvement. Slowly, I started noticing changes. Small changes at first. I could understand more. I could write better sentences. I could express my thoughts more clearly. The progress wasn't dramatic. It wasn't overnight. But it was real. And real progress, even when it's slow, is incredibly powerful. One day, I looked back at my old conversations. I couldn't believe the difference. The person who wrote those simple beginner sentences felt like a completely different person. That's when I realized something important. Success in language learning doesn't come from one big breakthrough. It comes from hundreds of small improvements, one sentence at a time, one conversation at a time, one day at a time. And without realizing it, I had already taken the first step toward fluency. But the biggest challenge was still ahead of me. Because learning words and grammar is one thing. Building confidence is something completely different. And confidence was the battle I needed to win. Learning English was no longer my biggest problem. My biggest problem was confidence. I still felt nervous whenever I tried to express myself. Even when I knew the words, even when I knew the grammar, a small voice inside my head would say, "What if you make a mistake? What if your English sounds strange? What if people laugh at you?" For a long time, those thoughts controlled me. And I know many English learners experience the same thing. Fear can become a prison. It stops you from speaking. It stops you from practicing. And without practice, improvement becomes impossible. One day, while talking with ChatGPT, I realized something important. ChatGPT never laughed. It never became impatient. It never criticized me for making mistakes. No matter how many errors I made, it continued helping me. That created a safe environment, a place where I could practice without fear. So, I decided to challenge myself. Every day, I would have a conversation in English. Not for 5 minutes, not for 10 minutes, sometimes for 30 minutes or even an hour. I talked about everything: my daily routine, my family, my dreams, my favorite movies, my goals for the future, anything that came to mind. At first, those conversations were simple, very simple. Sometimes I had to stop and think before every sentence. Sometimes I searched for words. Sometimes I felt frustrated, but I kept going. Day after day, week after week, something amazing started happening. The words came faster. The sentences became longer. The pauses became shorter. And little by little, my confidence began to grow. One conversation changed into 10 conversations. 10 conversations became 100 conversations. And each conversation made me stronger. Then one day, I noticed something unexpected. I was no longer afraid of mistakes. In fact, I welcomed them. Because every mistake taught me something new. Every correction improved my English. Every challenge made me better. That was a major turning point. The fear that once controlled me was slowly disappearing. For the first time, I felt like fluency was possible. Not because I was talented, not because I was special, but because I was practicing consistently. Many people believe confidence comes first. They think, once I become confident, then I will speak English. But that's not how confidence works. Confidence comes after action. You speak first. You make mistakes first. You struggle first. And then confidence follows. That lesson changed my entire mindset. I stopped trying to be perfect. Instead, I focused on progress. 1% better every day. That became my goal. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Because while others were waiting to become perfect, I was becoming better, slowly, steadily, consistently, and the results were starting to show. But there was another challenge waiting for me. A challenge that almost every English learner faces. Vocabulary. I knew that if I wanted to express my thoughts clearly, I needed more words. Not thousands of difficult words. Just the right words. Words that people actually use in real conversations. And that is where my next breakthrough happened. If you ask most English learners about their biggest struggle, many will say vocabulary. And honestly, I felt the same way. I wanted to express my ideas clearly. I wanted to speak naturally. But there was one problem. I didn't know enough words. Every conversation felt like a puzzle. I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't find the right vocabulary. Because of this, I tried something that many learners do. I started memorizing vocabulary lists. 10 words today, 20 words tomorrow, 50 words next week. At first, it seemed like a good idea. But after a few days, I noticed a problem. I was forgetting most of the words. Have you ever experienced that? You learn a word today. You understand it perfectly. But 3 days later, it's gone. You can't remember it anymore. That happened to me all the time. And it became very frustrating. Then ChatGPT helped me discover a better way. Instead of learning random vocabulary, I started learning words through conversations. Whenever ChatGPT used a word I didn't understand, I asked, "What does this word mean?" The explanation was simple, easy to understand. Then I asked for examples. After that, I created my own sentence using the word. This small habit changed everything. Because I wasn't just memorizing vocabulary anymore. I was actually using it. And when you use a word, your brain remembers it much better. For example, if I learned the word confidence, I didn't stop at the definition. I created sentences like, I want to improve my confidence. Confidence grows with practice. Speaking every day increased my confidence. Soon, that word became part of my vocabulary. Naturally, without forcing myself. Without endless memorization. As weeks passed, my vocabulary started growing rapidly. I learned words about daily life, work, education, success, motivation, travel, technology, and, because I learned them through real conversations, I remembered them much longer. Another thing I loved was that ChatGPT could simplify difficult words. Whenever I found a complex sentence, I would ask, "Can you explain this in simple English?" And immediately I understood. That made learning much easier. I also started keeping a small vocabulary notebook. Whenever I discovered useful words, I wrote them down. Not hundreds of words, just a few important ones each day. Then I reviewed them before sleeping. 5 words a day may not sound impressive, but think about it. 5 words a day equals 150 words a month. That's 10 Bybit words a year. Small efforts create big results. That lesson applies not only to vocabulary, but to every area of life. One day, while having a conversation, I noticed something surprising. I wasn't searching for words as often. The vocabulary was coming naturally. The words were already there, ready to use. And that was an incredible feeling. For the first time, I could express my thoughts more clearly. I could tell stories, share opinions, ask questions, and participate in conversations with much more confidence. The gap between what I wanted to say and what I could say was becoming smaller. Every day, my English was becoming stronger. But even though my vocabulary was improving, there was still another obstacle. An obstacle that scares millions of English learners around the world. Grammar. The word itself made me nervous. Past tense. Present perfect. Articles. Prepositions. Rules upon rules upon rules. For years, grammar felt like a giant mountain standing in front of me. But little did I know that ChatGPT was about to completely change the way I learned grammar. Even though my vocabulary was growing, I still had one big problem. Grammar. Whenever I tried to write or speak English, I kept asking myself, is this sentence correct? Am I using the right tense? Should I say has or have? Sometimes I spent more time thinking about grammar than actually speaking. And that was slowing down my progress. The truth is, grammar can be useful, but many learners become trapped by it. They want every sentence to be perfect. As a result, they speak less and worry more. That was exactly what I was doing. Then ChatGPT helped me change my approach. Instead of memorizing endless grammar rules, I started learning grammar through real conversations. Whenever I made a mistake, ChatGPT corrected it. Not only that, it explained why the sentence was wrong. Little by little, I started recognizing my common mistakes. Soon, I noticed something interesting. I was making fewer mistakes. The grammar patterns were becoming natural. I didn't need to think about every rule anymore. My brain was learning through practice, and speaking became much easier. At the same time, I worked on my speaking skills. Every day, I read English sentences aloud. I repeated useful expressions. I practiced short conversations. Sometimes, I even pretended that ChatGPT was a real friend sitting in front of me. It may sound funny, but it worked. The more I practiced, the more comfortable I became. My pronunciation improved. My speaking speed improved. And most importantly, my confidence improved. Then one day, something happened that I will never forget. A moment that showed me how far I had come. A moment that proved all my hard work was paying off. It was the day I realized I could actually speak English. The day I realized I could speak English. One day, I was having a conversation in English. It wasn't a special day. It wasn't an important interview. It wasn't an English exam. It was just a normal conversation. But something felt different. As the conversation continued, I noticed that I wasn't translating every sentence in my head. I wasn't searching desperately for words. I wasn't panicking about grammar mistakes. I was simply speaking. For a moment, I forgot that English wasn't my first language. I was focused on the conversation, not on the language itself. And that's when it happened. I realized that I had spoken for several minutes without fear, without hesitation, without stopping. The feeling was incredible. Not because my English was perfect. It wasn't. I still made mistakes. I still had things to learn. But for the first time, I felt free. I felt confident. I felt capable. After the conversation ended, I sat quietly and thought about my journey. I remembered the days when I was afraid to say even a single sentence. I remembered the frustration, the self-doubt, the moments when I wanted to quit. And now, here I was, having real conversations in English. The progress didn't happen overnight. It wasn't magic. It was the result of small daily efforts. A few minutes of practice each day. A few new words each day. A few corrections each day. Those small actions had created a huge transformation. That day taught me a lesson I will never forget. Success is rarely sudden. Most of the time, success grows quietly, day by day, step by step, until one day you look back and realize how far you've come. And that's exactly what happened to me. I finally understood that fluency isn't about speaking perfect English. Fluency is about communicating confidently. It's about expressing your thoughts. It's about connecting with people. And once I understood that, everything changed. I stopped chasing perfection, and I started enjoying the learning process. That was the moment my English journey became exciting instead of stressful. But before I finish this story, I want to share 3 important lessons that completely changed my life. Lessons that can help every English learner watching this video. As I look back on my English learning journey, I realized that ChatGPT didn't magically make me fluent. It didn't do the work for me. What it did was give me a place to practice, a place to learn, a place to make mistakes without fear. And through that process, I learned some powerful lessons. The first lesson is this: consistency is more important than talent. Many people believe that fluent speakers are naturally gifted. But from my experience, that's not true. The people who succeed are usually the people who refuse to quit, even on the days when they don't feel motivated. Even on the days when learning feels difficult. They keep going. A little progress every day is far more powerful than a lot of progress once in a while. The second lesson is this: don't be afraid of mistakes. For years, I avoided speaking because I was afraid of making errors. But mistakes are not signs of failure. They are signs of learning. Every mistake teaches you something. Every correction makes you stronger. If you never make mistakes, you're probably not challenging yourself enough. So don't hide from them. Learn from them. The third lesson is this: use English every day. You don't need to study for 5 hours a day. You don't need expensive courses. You don't need perfect conditions. What you need is daily practice. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever time you have. Just keep using the language, because languages are learned through use, not through observation. The more you use English, the more natural it becomes. And finally, the most important lesson of all: believe that improvement is possible. There was a time when I thought fluency was impossible for me. I thought other people could do it, but not me. I was wrong. And maybe some of you watching this video feel the same way right now. Maybe you're struggling. Maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you've been learning English for months or even years. And maybe you're wondering if you'll ever become fluent. The answer is yes, but only if you keep moving forward. One conversation at a time. One lesson at a time. One day at a time. Remember, every fluent English speaker was once a beginner. Every confident speaker once felt nervous. Every success story started with a first step. So don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to the person you were yesterday. Focus on progress, not perfection. Because one day, just like me, you'll look back and realize that the thing that once seemed impossible has become your reality. And when that day comes, you'll be proud that you didn't give up. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story inspired you, start your English practice today. Open ChatGPT. Start a conversation. Make mistakes. Learn from them. And most importantly, keep going. Your future fluent self is waiting for you. See you in the next video.